My body felt like an unbeaten drum.
Unbeaten drum,
Okay,
yes.
so we're now streaming live on YouTube, and we have about 10 people, so
We
I
should
guess
start.
we can start.
Perfect.
Shall we?
Yeah.
Showtime. Thank you all for joining us this evening for the online launch of this book that we're very proud of here at Wida Books, our latest title by our acclaimed author, E.C. Osondu. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making the time. And we're going to be here for about an hour talking about this. Some housekeeping. We will be opening this up to the audience later for questions. Basically, if you have any questions for the author, just please put them in the questions tab, and I will choose from there and read out to the author to respond to your comments, your questions, and so that we can all have a very, very enriching hour. You can keep the chat going on also in the chat boxes. And I'll just introduce the author. Isi Osondu has won numerous prizes, including the Kane Prize and the Pushcart Prize. Is the author of several books, including Voice of America, a collection of short stories, This House is Not for Sale, a novel, and Alien Stories. His latest book, which we are launching here today, is published for the first time in Nigeria, by Wida Books. So welcome, Isi Osondu.
Thank
How
you
are
very
you
much.
today?
I'm good. Very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great of you to join us for this launch. And have you been feeling since? Okay, so we're being recorded, yes. The system has told us we're being recorded, which is great. We want this to be on record so that people can watch later online, those who are not able to join us now. And how are you feeling about the publication of this book?
Very excited. I was quite excited to hold it in my hands, when it came out and you sent copies to me. Very excited. Like I said earlier, I said it's a very handsome looking book, just on the cover, just based on the cover. So the story itself is gorgeous, even if I say so myself. So I really hope people get the chance to read it and see for themselves.
Thank you. And it's really growing on, I mean, I loved it the moment I saw it, but it grows more on me by the day.
Yes, yes.
We're going to have you read I think we will have two portions of reading, maybe one straight away, if that's fine by you. Then I will ask you some questions, then we open to the audience, and we take another bit of reading later on. So if you're ready, you may want to read for us from When the Sky is Ready, the Stars Will Appear.
Great. I'll read a chapter. The chapters are really short, so I'll read a chapter called The Desert to kind of give our listeners a taste of the book. The desert. Even before I saw the desert, stories about the desert filled my ears like the desert sand. Many compared the desert to the sea, but made of sand, deep and mysterious. It was both a way, a road, a passage that sometimes led to death. Many were its terrors and secrets. Its belly was cavernous and huge, always hungry, never full. The desert is like the god of mischief. It always taunts the unwary. Here, look, an oasis to soothe your parched throat. Just crawl closer. Yes, crawl closer, and you can sit under the shade, drink and slake your thirst. The unwary draws nearer and nearer, and the only thing near is death. Many were the stories I heard. You must have heard the story about the man who was dying of thirst in the desert. He had been traveling for days when he ran into a man selling ties. His lips and feet were blistered, his clothes were dusty, and his throat was swollen with thirst. Buy this necktie, kind sir, the seller says to him. What a stupid thing to say to me, says the thirsty man. For though he was thirsty, he was still a little bit haughty. Trust me, you need the necktie. Buy it. It is beautiful, the tie seller insists. Listen, and I'm only going to tell you this once. I don't need a necktie. All I need right now is water. I'm ready to pay you any amount for a drop of water, the thirsty man says. Well, all I have is this tie. Do not say I did not offer you anything. With those words, the seller disappears into the dust. And what was that about? I must be getting lightheaded. It is this damn thirst. I must hurry and find a place to drink water, the traveler says to himself. He has traveled only a few miles after the encounter when he comes across a restaurant. It looks cool from a distance. The sign reads Oasis Inn. What an appropriate name. He walks to the inn and rings the bell. His thirst is worse. He manages to croak out the words to be let in. The man at the door points at a sign by the door. No necktie, no admittance. He begs and cries, but is ignored. He wanders back into the heat and dust in search of the man selling ties. The man selling ties is nowhere in sight. He makes his way back to Oasis Inn, reasoning that it is better to die by water than in the sand and the dust. Something interesting happens in the same desert. When truck drivers sight the half-eaten corpses of the dead in the desert, they pull over. Sometimes all that is left are bones. Driver and passenger get off the truck to dig a hole in the sand. After digging, each man contributes an item of clothing with which the body or whatever is left of it is swaddled. The men stand beside the body and with hands raised say the benediction for the dead. Heads bow and rise, heads bow and rise. When the swaddled remains are lowered into the earth, they return to their trucks and drive off into the heat. When you ask them why they do this, they give many answers. Some say it is a custom of the desert. Thank you.
Thank you so much for reading that very, very lyrical, very, very beautiful chapter. One of my favorite chapters, as I've told you before. Um, I'd like to encourage members of the audience once again to please drop your questions for the author into the questions box so that we can take those questions later. Now, you said the chapters are very short. Can you
Yes.
talk a bit about the structure of this novel and how you arrived at the particular structuring?
Well, I knew that there were a lot of stories that have been told about people who travel to Europe via the desert and the sea, especially mostly journalistic. And all they do tell stories of the horrors, okay, of these trips. And then, of course, there are also those who do the other thing, which is kind of frame this in terms of triumphalism. You know, the person, it's like an odyssey. The young man travels and goes through these horrors, and then eventually he gets to Europe, and after that, it's paradise for him. But I didn't want to do any of these extremes. I was more interested in telling one, individuating these people. That's something that I usually don't see in those narratives. I wanted this to be the story of individuals, okay, so that when you read the story, 60 migrants die in the sea, you know, that's like it's wrapped up in such a way, it's framed in such a way that these are not people, these are migrants and they're a group of people. But I wanted to also tell the stories of the individuals who make up these migrants. Who are they? Okay. And you know, the thing that interests me is something that is theorized a lot in literature, which is what some people say is what every story does, which is like that every story is a disruption of the existing order. You know, you go to the Garden of Eden, there is some order there, and then the serpent comes and disrupts it. You know, that it's interesting. So I was also interested in that from a theoretical point of view. You know, where is this idyllic Gulu Station village, and who is going to come and disrupt this ideal location, and with what? And so Europe intrudes, and things are never the same again. So all of that. But I wanted the story to also have the flavor of maybe like a parable. And so those chapters are just short and succinct, you know, and to the point. So
Like
all
a
of that,
parable, yeah, also in some sense like an allegory.
like an allegory, like a fable, that was a quality that I wanted it to have.
Yeah, yeah,
So that
okay.
informed the structure. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, there are lots of, I mean, taking on from what you've said, there are lots of stories within stories, folk tales, the Talantolo. We in my part of Nigeria, we have a version of that. I think we call it Arodon. And
Uh-huh.
a lot of people will. So it's almost like collecting communal stories. Can you talk a bit about what you were trying to achieve by having this sense of collectivity to the story?
Yeah, even the part that I read, there's a joke there. It's a famous joke. I'm also interested in jokes. It's a famous joke about the man who's in the desert getting lost and trying to get water, and someone tries to sell him a tie, and he thinks that's a useless item of clothing, and then he gets to this place and discovers you can't actually go into the restaurant without putting on a tie. And then, of course, there are lots of those things that you talk about, the folk tales and the stories and the all the myth and all the fables, all kind of. God, I've never been one for this one master narrative. I've always been one for having like a stream and then different tributaries coming into the ocean, coming into the water from. So all of these things, I think, I just things bits and pieces that I kind of brought to enrich the story.
I mean, from what the bit you've just read now, when we come towards the end of that chapter, the burial in the desert, where the the last two lines, if you ask them why they do this, some say it is the custom of the desert, and that notion of dignity also. And that really resonates all through to the end of this story. You've kept your characters, you've given them a sense of idealism, you've kept them kind of innocent in a way. Would you so even though they're skirting horrors, we never see them degraded.
Yeah, yeah. One of the lines I think from the book also says that we lost a lot of things, but not our sense of dignity or some this. I can find it, but I can't find it right now. And that's very important. As one gets older and as one continues to write, one realizes that it's also very important to clothe your characters with dignity. I think that Black people, Africans, we one of the things that we've been endowed with and imbued with is that we have a lot of dignity and pride, and it's been the job of those who are not like us to strip us of that dignity and strip us of that pride. That has been their constant, I think that has been their constant duty, as it were. Whether they are doing it consciously or not, there has always been an attempt to strip the black body of dignity through enslavement, through racism, okay, which continues even as we speak. So it's very important that we do not join in stripping ourselves of dignity. And so that's also a task and burden that the writer has. Prior to this time, 10 years ago, I wouldn't say this. 10 years ago, if you ask me, I'll say, oh, well, to tell the unvarnished truth. But if you realize daily that you live in a world where people are constantly doing stuff to take away from your pride and your dignity, then you cannot join in that. Okay, so that was also something that informed, it was a conscious decision, that these are not just some strays who you find who are desperate to get to Europe because they are dying in their homes or they're starving, but they are people with dreams and hopes, like your Vasco da Gama, who came here years ago, hundreds of years ago, and he got on a ship and came here. He traveled with dignity, he traveled with pride, all of them, Livingston, all of them, Mary Slade. So they came here. Those who left Portugal for this place, they didn't ask our permission before they came. Okay, they didn't ask our permission, and they came and we hosted them, which is really a bad thing because people who have the tendency that Africans have to be too hospitable end up paying dearly for it, whether they are called Native Americans or they are called Nigerians or they are called Africans. So, but all of that is to say that I think it's very important that we clothe ourselves with dignity, even in fiction writing.
And words like labels like illegal immigrants,
Hmm.
even migrants, you don't employ any of those labels. At some point, they call themselves travelers. They're a band of travelers.
Yes.
Um, yeah, just interested in what you chose, words that you chose not to use. If you can talk a bit about that.
Yeah. Words are very powerful. Words are very powerful, and this is something that I also explore in a different work about what it means to be an alien and how that alienates you, legal or illegal alien, and how those words can actually wound. Okay, so it's a common expression that has been questioned, and people have debated it on social media and in different places. That what's the difference between an expatriate and a foreigner and an immigrant? Why am I not called an expatriate in the United States, even though I'm a college professor, and and I come from a different country? Whereas the man who also does the same thing and lives in Nigeria is considered an expatriate. Why is that word reserved for him, and why is it not used for me? So words are very powerful. What people call themselves and what people allow themselves to be called is very important. For years, international students in the United States were known as foreign students, and that immediately told you that they were not of here. Okay, that they were not of here, and that immediately does something to them. When I was a kid, when I was younger, growing up in Lagos, when you went to visit your cousins or your aunties in the summer, well, it's not really in the summer, but like between July and September, you are called a holiday maker. And when you're a holiday maker, you're treated as a holiday maker. You don't do chores. Well, in my own experience, you don't do chores. And you go to see places, you go to visit places, and you're treated as a holiday maker. So you're there on holidays, and that's who you are. Of course, there's a difference in if you move back and start living in that house, then you're no longer a holiday maker. Then you start doing dishes like everybody else.
You have to sweep the floor.
Yes, you do. You do that. You do that. You start doing that. I remember my friend was hosting me in Lagos, and at night, he the air conditioner in my room was on. So at night, we came back, and he went and took a shower, and came to talk with me. And I said, "Oh, why are you're taking a shower? You're not wearing your clothes. You're not wearing a shirt. The air conditioner is going to freeze you." He said, "What air conditioner?" I said, "The one in your room." He said, "The one in his room is not on." I said, "But mine is on." He said, "Yeah, it's on because you're here for 2 weeks. But if you're here longer, then you'll go and take a shower like me and sleep with the fan." I said, "Oh, okay." So that tells you a whole lot. If you're a visitor, if you're an alien, if you're an immigrant, if you're a foreigner, these labels do stick, and they do have meanings that are far beyond what you might see. So I didn't want to damage them further, by calling them any of those names. But they are travelers, like the travelers who came from Portugal.
Indeed, 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 indeed. Um, Yeah, a bit more about your writing style, because I think that with writings by writers from Africa, we don't talk about style and stylistics enough, often about issues. And you have a distinctive style. And during editorial work on this, we were very conscious of it. The tendency to, employ maybe fewer commas than some other writers, which then lends very powerfully to the cadence of the lines, the lyricism of the lines running on, and we were conscious to keep that.
Yeah.
So if you, and also this very deceptively simple style, which is actually not easy to achieve. Can you talk a bit? And I've seen this in, some of your other writings, and it's here. You definitely have, a very distinctive voice. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, thanks for respecting that. It's a constant battle that I have to fight, even with editors, with other editors here. Run-on lines is like seen as a grammatical faux pas. I know that, but then I deliberately have run-on lines and just don't use enough commas. But it's deliberate, it's conscious, because I'm also trying to imitate the way the story comes to me. I'm not sounding mystical, but the truth is that for me, writing first begins in the head for a long time, and it sits there for a long time. Like I told you, the process of writing this novel itself didn't take years for me, because the novel has been in my head for long, and I've been thinking about it, kind of chewing it, mulling it, playing it around in my head. And so when I sat down to write, I want to be as faithful as much as possible to that voice that gives me the story. And so I tried to pour it down. Of course, in the editorial process, you also tried to work towards clarity, so that even though the voice might be very clear to me, it might not be very clear to the reader. Okay, and so you had to take away some of those things. But it's also very important to be as faithful to that voice as much as possible. And I'm also very conscious, very informed by the nature of oral storytelling, I think. Perhaps that too has tends to have an influence on the way I write.
Yeah, definitely. One cannot miss that. And also, let me see if we have any questions. None so far. Please drop your questions into the questions box. Please engage this writer.
Yeah,
Let's
sure.
really get him to share a lot
Everyone
of,
is welcome to the party. It's
yes, ideas in this session. So yeah, um, even dialogue, quite often quotes are there's an imprecise tendency when it comes to attribution. Quotes are often attributed to, they said, we said. It's rarely individualized.
mm.
And also that's a deliberate choice for this book. If you can talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I even think that when I handed in the manuscript, there were no dialogue tags initially. Yes, but I think that was going a bit too far. So I think in the first edits, line of edits, the dialogue tags were introduced. But again, what I wanted to do was tell what I'll consider a continental, global story of the continent. You know, and also, like I said, in the nature of African oral storytelling, there is a like I said, have you had the story of this? Sometimes it's also said that have you had something that someone said, that these people usually say, and it's usually like a collective. Even the proverbs and the sayings always seem handed down, but they are never attributed to one person. Precision is not the strong suit. Oh, sometimes you need to be precise, but that's not really what it's about. So that's also an influence there.
The lead character goes
Mhm.
without a name,
Yeah,
even though sometimes he refers to himself as Nene's son.
that's
He's
right.
not named, and he's actually unique in not being named in the book. What are you trying to represent by not giving him a name, like an everyman figure?
That's slightly that, like a candid figure, slightly that. But also one of the things that I was conscious about was Nigeria has become more tribalistic by the day. If each year I visit, I find that people of my generation have a different attitude to tribe than the younger generation for some reason, which is not their fault. They have also been very divisive leadership recently in Nigeria and all of that, which is a factor. But I was also trying not to. For instance, Gulu Station. Where is Gulu Station? Lola might know this. We used to have a friend called Izia Ahmad. He was very famous in Lagos literary circles as a poet, as a lover of Bob Dylan's music, and we shared an affinity because he was also an advertising copywriter, which I was 500 years ago. So we kind of knew ourselves. And Izia Ahmad probably was one of the most famous poets because he was what was called an update poet himself. Afam Aki and Uchenduka were one of the first to have books published as poets, individual poetry collections. So Izia Ahmad is from either Plateau or Kaduna State, but of course he spent most of his life in Lagos. But he was from a place called Gudu Station. Yes, I think he's from a place called Gudu Station. And that has always fascinated me. That has always remained in my consciousness. It's either in Kaduna State or in Plateau State. And so that was where that came from. So I could have placed the story in Igbo land. I could have placed the story in Hausa land. I could have placed it in Yoruba land, but I didn't want to do that. I deliberately didn't want to do that. And if you look at the group, they're an eclectic group of Nigerians. But I was very conscious of not giving it a particular hue, a particular identifiable flavor. So how do I run away from that? If I name him this or I name him that, it's going to be very. I just wanted him to not to have that kind of identity.
Oh wow! Well, I'm glad I asked that question.
Yes, yeah, it took me back, yeah. And anyone who I have very warm memories of Izzy Ahmad. He was a great guy, he was a great guy.
I mean, his name used to come up in literary conversations a lot.
Yeah.
back in the days of the good old creativity and
Right,
so
right, right. Yes, that's
when
right.
there was a lot of talk about the third generation of
Yes,
Nigerian writers.
yes.
I don't know what generation there is anymore
No,
now.
it's generation Z right now. The Z generation. I
There's
think
fragmentation
they've
now.
moved away from numbers to letters now.
Yeah,
So it's
I love that. I love that.
generation
So
Z. So
yeah,
they're
Gulu
just set the
Station.
numbers.
Yes. So Gulu Station takes us nicely to the sense of place in this novel. The desert, the sea, the depiction of these places. Rome. Rome, obviously, because people crossing the continent to Europe. Italy is probably, yeah, the closest to the
Tuscaloosa.
African landmass.
Yes.
But when they land in Italy, they're not getting, Rome is still far away. So you've clearly chosen Rome here for a very, very important reason. And can you talk about the sense of place and then touch on this really, really almost classical kind of depiction of Rome? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
not necessarily geography. I mean, I just got back from Rome. I was there last week, coincidentally, to launch the Italian version of the book. Okay, so there was a lot of questions in that direction. So why Rome? But as I went to a Catholic boarding school, and so it says Rome is in heaven. And as someone who went to a Catholic boarding school, there was always this consciousness of Rome being the equivalent of heaven because it's the place where the Pope lives and it's the place where they speak Latin. And you
The
imagine
eternal city, the
the
eternal city.
eternal city of Rome. So it's been there much more in my consciousness than probably a place like London, simply because of my education in a Catholic school setting. So that was partly that. And so the line starts by Rome is in heaven because it is also seen as an ideal. We call it the eternal city. It's like seen more of an ideal than a real place. You know, and so one of the things that I was telling I was telling my publicist on Sunday was that I thought everyone will be in church on Sunday in Rome. And she laughed and said, church, what church? Everybody's out drinking beer by 10 a.m. in the morning. What church? And I was kind of shocked. She said, oh, her grandmother is in church, but she's not. So again, like I told her, I said I didn't, that was one information I didn't want to hear because there's this ideal in my head, and that's the ideal that you have in the novel, this perfect picture of place. So I'm aware of the fact that, of course, the closest place to North Africa, if you look at the map, is actually Italy, and that's the place that this man is likely to end up in. But it's also the most idealized. It's the most idealized place. So that also plays a role in placing him, giving him that trajectory, that movement from Africa to Europe.
Well, thank you for it. At the time we were turning to, working or to prepare this novel towards publication, I
Yeah.
had not long returned from Rome myself, and I was still really, really, my head was still whirling in just all the glory of it,
Yeah.
and using that to console oneself as COVID-19 ravaged the world. So to now see Rome in this book like this, I treasured it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, the country of rumors. Audience members, please drop your questions. Please, can we have your questions in the questions box? I can't see any so far. I don't want to hog this to myself, so please let us have your questions and the author can tackle them. The country of rumors,
Mm-hmm.
clearly loosely based on Libya before the
That's
fall
very
of
correct.
Gaddafi.
That's very correct.
Can you say a bit about the chosen timeline for this story and why?
Well, the country of rumors is, again, all these are places like these are stops, pit stops on the way to Rome, and each place has its own conflict. Some places have more draw. Some places have a uh, huge attraction. But this was Libya just uh, before Gaddafi's overthrow. And it was a place where he would have thought that this the same thing that happened that kind of drove him away from Gulu Station, the appearance of the seven-man army, is replicating itself here. That's one. And then of course there is the figure there who is also a Bros-like figure who invites them to his home, and tries to say, hey, why are you guys taking this harrowing route? I can actually help you, but you have to carry a little parcel for me. And then you end up with a lot of money and you end up flying there. So again, that is like the Gulu station in miniature, that brush-like figure trying to make them, but he's clearly focused. And, that chapter again helps me to kind of highlight again the near spiritual quality of Nene. He says Nene is looking him, he could see her blinking, he could see her making signs at him that he should leave, he should leave. And she's like a guiding spirit. She's always like something perched on his shoulders, trying to put him all right at every point, saying, look, this is the path, follow it. Don't go this way. Don't go that way. The other thing again that it's made me helped me to do was also to talk about the seeming economic comfort in which the people from their country live, and yet they were complaining about it, and yet they were ready to overthrow the government, which happens much, much later. And the question we're asking now is, are they better for it or are they not? What has the country become? Even with the support of the West and the overthrow of Gaddafi, there's this song that says, now that we found love, what are we going to do with it? Now that they've had their revolution and they have removed the evil dictator, what has the country become? With the support of the United States, what has the country become? Is it still a country? So it's there. So that gave me the opportunity to raise all of those questions, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I didn't make them stop in that.
You were saying something earlier about, what disrupts. Yes, I mean, what you just said, Gulu Station, relatively content life until the appearance of Bros, and also in the country of rumors, they have a lot of, I mean, the travelers think that the people in the country of rumors have it all, laid out for them, and yet they're not happy. So in terms of, the disruptor, the character of Bros,
Yeah.
what is this? Can you talk a bit
I
about
love
the symbolism of
I
Bros?
love him. I love him. Bruce
I
is
love I love Bros myself. Yes.
I love him. He's a very interesting character. One of the
You can
things
see what we call him in the blurb, an enigmatic drifter.
that's right. That's right. Because one of
Returns
the
to Kulu
questions,
Station from Rome,
yeah,
laden with gifts and the allure of other places.
yes, he's both a drifter and a grifter, if you ask me.
I love that.
Yes,
Yes.
not a drifter and a grifter. One of the things that people ask is, oh, Bruce must be cruel and evil because when this guy landed in Rome, he didn't pick up the phone. The question they're not asking is, what kind of life is
We
Bruce
don't
actually
want we don't
living?
want the audience to know what happens when
Oh, okay. Yeah.
we don't
Spoiler
want
alert.
to spoil it. Yes,
Spoiler
but
alert.
carry
Spoiler alert.
on.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, the question is, what kind of life does Bruce live in Rome? And it's really important for him to have come on this junket, this once in a lifetime junket, to show off, to win the love of someone he's always wanted, to disrupt the existing order. Seeming, it says that every day of his visit was like a party. And that was what he wanted. He wanted every day of his visit to be like a party, to bring this kind of glam and, and fun and, everything that you associate with Europe. He wanted to bring it. He wanted to bring it to Gulu Station, and he does successfully. But he's also not an evil person. It's just that he's not the most honest person on earth, because even when he gives the young man the map, he didn't think that the young man was going to do it. He
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
yeah, he basically was trying to say, well, if you ever, it's like you meet someone while you were flying to Italy the last time, and you get to talk. You're sitting, your seatmates on the plane, and you get to talk, and then the person you tell the person, well, any day you're in Nigeria, just give
Yeah.
me come
Oh,
come over,
yeah,
come
hook me
over, come
up.
over.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, the person shows up in a box in front of your door. You're going to run away. Like, come on, I was just being polite. I was just, I
It
was
was
just
just conversation.
yeah, just being polite. So the same thing with Bros, he was just being polite. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't evil, but that was his very nature. And then he is this intrusion, whether you want to call it the intrusion of Westernization, you know, with their goods, with their shiny, empty goods, whether that's what you want to look at it, even from the colonial or pre-colonial point of view of what was the ideal, what kind of life were we living, and then what happened to it when something which is outside of it suddenly intrudes, and what are the consequences for the people in this society? Does it make the society better, or does it ruin them, or does it send them on this wild goose chase like our young protagonist? I think there are a
Thank
bunch of
you.
questions. Yes, so you want, I think.
Yes, yes, yes. The audience have decided to roar.
Okay.
So let's start from, there are two in the chat boxes, but we'll start with the one in the question box. And it's by Tope and your banker Adegoke, and I'll just read it out for you. On style and editing, I noticed something about the narrator's voice early on. The author keeps it simple and innocent, but his choice of words in the opening chapter of the book kind of forced his voice into into the narrators. This is evident in the word plastic in the opening chapter. I think the author used it about 4 times in the novel, but the first instance seemed a bit contrived. You're being critiqued here, if I may say, because what is called plastic is in fact understood to be called nylon, but we call it plastic in the small towns now. Of course, it comes down to how the story is told, but I think the other word should have been preferred. Anyway, this is just my thought about it, especially in respect to the penultimate question he answered to at the back of the book. I would like to hear the author's take on it.
That's a
Okay,
good
so
question.
please, you may take that.
That's a great question because it shows that the reader has read the book so thoroughly that he even knows the number of times a certain word is used. And that's very impressive. I like
The
that.
kind of readers we want.
Yes, that's very impressive. Read it down to the letter T. And so that's a good question. The thing again is striking a balance between between your knowing your audience, okay, and the exact words that they'll use, and also remembering that all my audience is not Nigerian either. But I don't know. I'll have to go back to the book and look this up. Plastic bag and nylon bag. That's a very, and again, do not forget that I've left Nigeria for a while, and my grasp of Nigerianism is not as sharp as it would be, even though I pretend that it is by using expressions like "you choke." But I'm not as good as yes, as good as I would be. So it might not even have been conscious. It might have been asleep. It might have been just the fact that I'm more used to calling it a plastic bag now
Yeah.
than a nylon bag. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we used to say nylon back in the day.
yeah.
So there's a question in the chat boxes. Did you have any specific vision for how you wanted the characters in this book to be? If yes, did it change in the course of writing the story? And that is from, I'm trying to see who that is. But please, that's the question.
Yeah, that's a good question again because when, like I said, when we started talking, I said that one of the things that I do is that I tend to spend a lot
Okay.
of time more
Ogunwanimashaun is the questionnaire, but please carry on. Sorry.
great, that I tend to spend a lot of time mulling mulling books or stories before I eventually come down to writing them. And so when I started writing this, I'll have to say that there were two things that were very clear: the beginning and the end. That was very clear. I knew that he would eventually go to Rome, and then of course, spoiler alert again, I can't say what happens to him over there. But I was very conscious of the fact that I was going to do both. So those were clear. But the things that happened in between, there were changes. Of course, it keeps changing as you're writing, But when I started, I had an idea of the beginning. I had a very clear idea of the end, and that never changed. Okay, that never changed, but a lot of things came a lot of things came into play in between. So the middle was not clearly formed, even in my consciousness, and I discovered the middle as I went along. But both ends were already bookended and they were already open, started clearly and ended clearly for me.
Thank you. Brilliant. It's a brilliant question and brilliant answer. And
Great.
the question is by Odun Anima Shaun, who has a second question. What was the main inspiration for the title of your novel?
That's a that's a
When
great
the sky
question.
is ready, the stars will appear.
That's a great question to which I have no clear answer because I don't know where it came from. Yeah, it's a great question, but it's a title that came to me while I was writing the book, and I just scribbled it down. You know, but then again, I think that it's an homage to an expression that when the people are ready, the leader will appear. Okay, so when the people are ready, the leader will appear. When the sky is ready, the stars will appear. When the continent is ready, instead of these brilliant minds streaming away to some other place, maybe when the continent is ready, it will be ready to accommodate them and they can be stars, they can shine within the continent uh, without having to go to other places to shine, the places that already have the lights that are already shining. So make of that what you will. But to be honest, it wasn't something I spent a lot of time thinking to kind of carve it and make it up. And no, it's not that precious. I didn't think of it so much. One of the things that has always one of the it's I'm so sad to disappoint you, but I remember listening to the soccer star Pelé, the Brazilian soccer star, and the man was asking him what's the meaning of the name Pele, and he said it's just a nickname. It's not anything important. And as a young man, I was so disappointed because I was like, Pele is one of the most famous names in the world. Why are you dismissing it like? But that's really the truth. The title wasn't something but it sounds profound and deep, and it is in a way, but it's not something that I spent a lot of time thinking about.
And also an encapsulation of your style because it's long. There are no commas, but it just rolls. It's just beautiful. It just unspools on the
Yes,
tongue.
it is
So
very.
yeah. So
It is.
I mean, you've just uh, you've just riffed on the title now for us,
Mhm.
and I wonder what you feel about because the issue of irregular migration or migration in general or the brain drain, it mutates all the time. And we're currently now in Nigeria in the Japa generation. Everybody is leaving.
Mhm.
And we're not hearing so much now of the people living by the desert and the sea.
Yeah.
We've, over the last couple of days, been concerned about images of Haitian refugees being herded by border guards on horseback
Mhm.
by the sea and all of that. And, these are Black people. And so I wonder just how how you feel about the situation with the disaffection of in our societies and people's need to live, and how the Western powers are confronting that. And
It's again the humiliation of the black body. People from Haiti are darker than you and I. And I bet that if the border between the United States was between the United States and Africa, a wall that would touch heaven like the one in the days of the Bible would be built to keep black people out. The way black people have been brought here is by force and through slavery. And so that was deliberate. Now, if they consciously want to come of their own free will, there is an attempt to keep them out. One of the things that has made me very excited and happy about this book's release is how germane and how relevant this topic remains. Because even yesterday, the image that you talked about was the first thing that woke me up when I checked the news on my phone. Okay, so it's something that is not going to end. I was reading about the fact that thousands of Nigerian medical doctors are now leaving for the UK. Thousands of them living for the UK. I say, well, long live the agbo sellers. That is going to help to help to help. Without Agbo, maybe everybody would die. But that, it's sad. It's sad that we are still living in droves. I don't blame those who leave, because there is a Yoruba saying, I think, there has been, I don't even know how to say it in Yoruba, but it says that no matter how bad your child is, you don't drive your child and drive your child into the mouth of a lion. Is there something like that? Am I making this up?
There's something like that, but I don't want to risk
Yes, okay. So but
trying to
literally,
articulate it right now.
right.
Yes.
Yes, so you don't drive your mouth. You no matter how stubborn your child is, you don't feed your child to a lion.
And
That's
I
that,
think the
that's
saying is, "Oh, Niki, buru kafe fekun paje." However
good.
bad the child is, you
Yes.
don't give it to the tiger to eat.
To eat,
Yes.
that's very good, very good. But that's what is literally happening. The continent is literally giving its children to the tiger as a meal. Whether the tiger is the sea, whether the tiger is the desert, whether the tiger is the economic uncertainty that they're going to face as migrants. It's very shocking. But that's really why this book is kind of apropos now, because one would have thought that, oh, this issue is dead and gone. People are no longer talking about this. The world is at peace now. The issue of migration has rested. No, it's something that keeps bubbling because the continent is usually in a state of disrepair, as it were, and is spewing and sending its children to the tiger to be eaten. Those who escape through just by the whiskers.
Indeed, indeed. Maybe we can take another reading now, if that's fine by you.
Okay, so I'll read the first chapter. I think that kind of gives a flavor of the book and sets it up. And it's called Rome is in Heaven. It says, the first time I heard of Rome, I thought it was a place in heaven. Like Jerusalem, Israel, Syria, Jordan, Abyssinia, and those type of places you only read about in the holy books. But this time around, an actual person from Gulu Station had just returned from Rome. Let me call him Bros out of respect and reverence, because in Gulu Station, you're not allowed to call any person older than you by their name. The day Bros returned from Rome, he came back with so many boxes. The boxes took such a long time to offload, and they were all the same color. That was the day I came to realize that boxes could have families just like us humans. There were two light boxes, the mama and the papa box, and many little brother and sister boxes. Brush transformed his father's old house with so many fissures and crevices that lizards took naps in them, now plastered with cement and painted in an electric blue color. Electric wires ran and snaked up the house and around the roof, and high wattage electric bulbs shone at us and scared the darkness away from Gulu Station. Bros brought food, music, and danced like we had never experienced before. There was a lot of food, a cow was slaughtered, and the aroma of fried meat hit every nose in Gulu Station. Bros shared money and gifts. Each time he came out from the inner room, he had something shiny and sweet smelling in his hands. All his brothers wore t-shirts with the word filler written on them. The A looked crooked and funny and was shaped like an S. During his stay, Bros only wore a singlet and shorts. He hung a towel around his neck with which he often mopped his face. The towel was a conversation starter for his guests. They spoke about the weather in Gulu Station and the weather in Rome. It was hot in Gulu Station, but we did not even feel the heat. In Rome, it got so cold sometimes, ice fell from heaven, and people had to wear thick clothes to keep the cold away. We have Hamatan in Gulu Station, but it only comes towards the end of the year. During this time, we have to wear sweaters and sit around the fire to warm our hands. It never lasts long. On rare occasions during a heavy downpour, ice pellets fell from the sky. We pick the ice and place it on our tongues before it melts. Even though I now know that Rome is not in heaven, Bros' house was like a heaven during his visit, a place of eternal feasting, dancing, and singing. The big electric generator hummed. The television screened foreign shows. People danced on the television screen, waving their hands like they had no care in the world. We danced in Bros' father's house sitting room, forgetting our cares and anxieties. Everyone said Bros was a good son. He had made his parents and Gulu Station proud. I wanted to make Nene and Gulu Station proud too. I wanted to I wanted people to eat and drink in Nene's house as they were doing in Bros's house. I wanted to install a giant television in Nene's sitting room, which the people of Gulu Station would come to watch. I wanted to go to Rome, but I had no idea how. On the third day of his visit, Bros called me and asked if I knew Miss Koi Koi's house. Miss Koi Koi was a school teacher in Gulu Station. We called her Miss Koi Koi because of the sound of her high heel shoes, because of the sound her high heel shoes made on the cement floor on the schoolhouse. I want you to give her this letter and this gift. Tell her that Bros sent you. You must wait to get a reply from her. Do not speak to anybody on your way to her house and on your way back, Bros said. The gift was a small bottle of perfume. It had the words on it that began with the letter CH. The plastic wrap around the perfume smelled so good, I wondered how heavenly the perfume smelled. The scent we all knew in Gulu Station was sold by an itinerant hawker who would measure out the light green scent into little bottles. It had a picture of an unsmiling, half-naked woman on it, and it was called Bint El Sudan. I ran the errand just as Brod had instructed me, not speaking to anyone on my way to or from Miss Koiko's house. That was how I got close to Bros. I was the bearer of his love notes to Miss Koikoi. His notes were long, her replies were short. I was happy Bros picked me to run his errands and deliver Miss Koiko's carnation-scented notes to him. I wished that one day Miss Koiko's notes would be longer and Bros would smile as he read them. I really wanted to see it happen. When I told Nene how Bros had picked me out for attention, she laughed. He who remembers a favor done to him has repaid it 1,000 times, she said. What favor was Nene talking about? That boy used to run around Gulu Station in khaki drawers, riding and spinning anything that could move, Nene said. We're outside, sitting under the setting sun. Nene was grinding peppers with a stone grinder. He rode a bicycle and called it his car. He even built a car out of old tins of milk. He built a truck out of sugarcane stems. She laughed as she said this, pressing her left hand on her chest. He announced his arrival by mimicking the horn with his mouth. One day, your father gave him a used car tire. He was so happy he rolled the tire around the village. And then one day, your father sat him between his legs and let him turn the steering wheel of his pickup truck. So he still remembers. Ah, this life, Nene said. It was only then I realized that it was not an accident that Bros chose me to run his errands. I felt like even though my father was in a land far beyond, his eyes still watched over me, and his hand was firmly on my back.
I'm muted. I'm sorry. Sorry, everyone. So, yeah. So we're coming to a bit of a close. I just have about 3 questions, and I'd like to encourage anyone that has any further questions to quickly drop them in so that we can put them to the author. Miss Koi Koi is in this reading. Now, this is a story largely of men. Now, with the women, especially, you've already talked about Nene. Now, Ayira,
Mm-hmm.
can you talk about that character for us a bit? Because the only female among the travelers, and what you were trying to do with her character.
This used to be a journey mostly of women, of men rather.
Yeah.
Used to be for the longest time. It used to be the road to Libya is so fraught that it was a journey that was mostly undertaken by men. Usually the women who take the journeys, even now that they've started taking the journeys, are usually led by what they call burgers, by people who are like a guide, people who want to take them to certain places to do certain things for them. Okay, so it's not surprising that the dominant voice is the male voice because of the nature of this journey, how arduous it is, and how proud to this time very few women undertook the journey. But as the continent continues to get economically more perilous, more and more women are going on this trip. Some of them are going to work as servants in Jordan. Some of them are going to these trips to Rome, like the men, and to a bunch of other places. So that is really the actuating impulse for not having a lot of them there. But you know, Ira's case, she's on this journey And her own story is also a fascinating one. You know, her life story, her own narrative is a fascinating one, and also goes to kind of highlight all the things that women go through in the continent and in Nigeria and the society that she's coming from. And in fact, it doesn't even stop because the other travelers kind of sneer. Even though they carry their own dreams and they feel like their own dreams are legitimate. Because she's female, they feel like her own dream should be smaller and is somewhat less legitimate than their own. You know, so they need to check their own privilege as men. So that we have that in that story. And it's also interesting that Bruce does not feel like he was good enough until he goes to Rome and comes back. Then he can talk to Miss Koi about being in love with her.
Thank you. We have one more question from Tope Nyobanke again. On Miss Koi Koi, the name evokes teary laughter. Could the author use this opportunity to talk about naming his characters? Wonderful question.
Yeah, that's a great question because it's not just here, but even in my short story from 5,000 years ago called Waiting, you know, the characters were named after the names on their T-shirts. You know, it's something that's always fascinated me because it's if you go back to the earliest fictions, you know, character is faith, like Aristotle famously said. I hope it's Aristotle, not Plato. um, I hope it's one of the Greeks anyway that said character is fate. You know, your character is fate. Your name is your fate in most cases. You have Nathaniel Hawthorne's short story titled Young Goodman Brown, where the character is literally young and a good person and his innocence. So it's something that is also very important. Even in Nigeria, the idea of naming now has become very important. The idea of conversion from Abraham to Abraham, from from Saul to Paul, and the idea of people now consciously uh, giving their children names that are aspirational, that are aspirational rather than circumstantial, which used to be the case historically. Okay, so that's also something that I find fascinating. Um, that names mean so much more than especially in my part of the world, their names mean much more than they do here. Because I usually ask my students here, we're reading a novel from India called The White Tiger, where names also mean everything. Names means you hear the man's last name, you can tell his caste, you can tell the job that he's going to be doing. And we talk about that a lot because I'll ask, what does your last name mean? And the person will say, oh, it's just wood. And I say, no, it probably shows that your ancestors worked with wood. So they were carpenters or people who had a conscious relationship with wood one way or another. And the person was, oh, I never thought of that. And I said, well, if your last name is coal, then your ancestry has to do with coal miners, coal mining. That's the truth. But the great thing about your society is that you are not now a coal miner, you know, because that would, if that society was a society where social aspirations, where there was a glass ceiling, okay, then it simply meant that you would not be anything more than someone who mines coal. Uh, so naming names are very important.
There's social mobility.
Yes, but that's the word I was scrounging around. Yes, if there was no social mobility, then you're bound, your leg is tied to being a coal miner. So names are very important to me, but also I kind of wanted something that you noticed in that name is that I wanted it to be both humorous and also, you know, uh, so humorous and also didactic at the same time. So her name is both humorous and circumstantial. She's called Miss Koiko, and that doesn't surprise me because teachers often get nicknamed much more than any other set.
Thank you. Towards the end of the novel, we see statues, and they seem to be telling the narrator that the naked can be proud,
Mhm.
can have dignity. The same can be said of the band of travelers in your novel. You told the story, and we've already talked about the dignity of the. Uh, if you can just say something about the kind of people that you write about from your previous writings, I mean, we would say that, that writers we could name and would say they write about upper middle class people, but you don't seem to be in that box. So if you can just talk about, the ordinary people that you, would it be correct to say that you write about the common man or woman or?
Maybe that's what interests me. I think that good writing brings me. That's something that has often been said, that interesting writing brings me. I'm really, really not curious about people who are like, it doesn't hold any fascination for me, both as a writer and as a reader. I'm more interested in those who are probably not like me, not familiar. Okay, so that's a conscious. I want to write away from myself and write into those who I do not know so much, so I can discover.
Final question.
Oh, I thought that was the final one. Okay,
This
go
is the
ahead.
final question. No, this is the final question. Now, when the sky is ready, the stars will appear is the one read book of the month.
Yeah,
How do you feel about that?
very excited. Very
And it's
excited.
being read all over Africa on the
Very,
One Read app.
very, very excited. Very needed. A very African book, and I'm happy with the fact that it's being published in Nigeria and it's available for everyone who would always say, "Oh, how can I find the book? Where can I buy it?" Now this is available, and you can literally walk into the place with books in GRA and you get a copy. So don't ask me on Facebook, how can I find a copy? I'm happy that it's being read across the continent because I kept mentioning Africa as we were chatting because the continent really needs this consciousness. Let's fix it. Let's think about it. Let's fix it so that the stars will truly not only appear, but they will shine.
Thank you so much, Isio Sondu. Thank you for the wonderful opportunity. We're really proud that we'll be taking this to readers everywhere. And as Lola Shunei, the publisher, said, we have big dreams for this book.
Me
And
too.
so, yeah, we're really looking forward to this journey with When the Sky is Ready, the Stars Will Appear. Thank you so much
Well,
for sharing about your writing and this book here with
as you
us
rightly
today.
know, I've been a fan for a very long time, right from the days of Watch Body. So it's always good to see you, if only just virtually. Thank you so much, and thank you, Lola, and thank you for everybody. Thanks to everybody at Reader Books for making this happen, and everything you're doing to make the book,
Thank you.
to get people to buy and read the book. I hope everyone goes out and gets it.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for the
Quick question.
questions. And yes, you can get copies of the book, and we look forward to to seeing you at our next event. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, Molara, take it easy. Have a great day.
All right. Bye. Enjoy
All right.
yourself.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.